You fall for someone based on a feeling, a conversation, a spark, bad timing that somehow turns into good timing. For most of human history, that feeling meant almost nothing. Who you were allowed to marry had already been decided before you were even born by a rule so strict that breaking it could get you exiled from the only group keeping you alive. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even really about you. It was a survival rule wearing a wedding dress. You think you chose them. Actually, for most of the last 300,000 years, you wouldn't have gotten a vote at all. Here's where it gets stranger. Anthropologists have found something older than religion, older than law, older than your parents' opinions. A rule called exogamy. You had to marry outside your own band, your own clan, your own immediate circle of blood. Researchers have documented some version of it in nearly every hunter-gatherer society ever studied, on every continent. Sitting right next to it was something even stricter, the incest taboo. Every known human society, without exception, forbids marriage between parents and children, between siblings. Most stretch that circle out even further, to cousins, to whole branches of kin. Here's the part most documentaries about ancient love skip. Nobody invented this. No priest, no king, no lawmaker sat down and wrote it. It shows up, in some form, in essentially every culture ever studied, which means it's old. Old enough that some researchers think it's close to hardwired into how we're built, not just how we're raised. So if the rule is that universal, that old, that strict, what was it actually protecting? Because it wasn't your happiness. In 1949, French anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss argued something that still unsettles people. Marriage was never really about two individuals. It was about forging a permanent bond between two entire groups, using a person as the connection point. Here's why that mattered enough to be worth your life. The first reason was food. Researchers studying resource variability among hunter-gatherers found that marrying outside your group built a built-in emergency line. When your territory failed to produce enough to eat, marriage ties to another band meant somewhere else to go, and someone obligated to take you in. The second reason was defense. A band of 30 people with no outside ties had 30 people to defend it. A band connected by marriage to 4 or 5 other bands had allies who owed them something. The third reason was information. Who knew where the water still ran in a drought, which valley the herds had moved to, which neighboring group had turned hostile? Marriage ties carried that knowledge across hundreds of miles, generation after generation. You'd assume marrying a stranger from another band was a compromise. Actually, it might have been the single smartest survival move a Stone Age family could make. In Uhlau, Germany, archaeologists uncovered a 4,600-year-old grave holding a man, a woman, and 2 children, buried facing each other, arms still linked. Genetic testing confirmed it. A family. But isotope analysis of the woman's teeth told a second story. She hadn't grown up anywhere near that valley. She'd been raised somewhere else entirely, then brought in. That single burial is physical proof of the exact system Levi-Strauss described. Marriage moving a person and everything she knew into a community that needed her. Except that isn't the whole story. Because some cultures didn't stop at marry outside the group, some engineered exactly who, inside that wider circle, you were supposed to marry. You'd assume every culture handled cousins the same way. Actually, some forbade it completely. Others required it. Among the Selknam, hunter-gatherers of Tierra del Fuego, ethnographer Martin Gusinda spent years living among them in the early 1900s. He recorded open disgust at the mere suggestion that distant cousins might marry. He was told, flatly, blood relatives simply could not be joined. Full stop. No further discussion. Now flip that completely. In many other societies, certain cousins weren't just allowed. They were the preferred, ideal partner. Anthropologists call it cross-cousin marriage. Same species, opposite instinct, depending entirely on which culture drew the map. There was no just going with your gut option. Who you could love was mapped out generations before you were born. Scientists don't love admitting this part, but here's the exception. Almost every documented break in the incest taboo throughout history happened inside royal families. Cleopatra was married to at least 2 of her own brothers. Not out of desire, but to keep power from ever leaving the family line. In 2010, a genetic study on Tutankhamun's mummy, led by Zahi Hawass, confirmed his parents were siblings. His skeleton told the rest: a clubfoot, bone necrosis, a cleft palate, malaria layered on top. His body carried the physical cost of the exact rule everyone else was forbidden to break. You'd think the powerful were exempt from this rule by accident. Actually, they broke it on purpose. Everyone else married out for more allies, more safety, more shared food. The elite married in to keep it all for themselves. And it didn't stop at the wedding. Anthropologists studying hundreds of documented societies found marriage often meant relocation, moving in with the husband's family or the wife's, sometimes shifting between both. One decision, and your entire daily life changed. New camp, new faces, strangers who were now, by rule, obligated to treat you as family. Now put yourself back in it. You get to swipe, choose, break up, and try again as many times as you want, based entirely on how someone makes you feel. They had one rule, decided before they were born, that could mean survival or exile depending on whether they followed it. You call it a red flag when someone's family doesn't approve. Their entire community could have starved if they'd ignored that same kind of disapproval. We think we invented the idea of marrying for love. What we actually did was remove the rule that used to make marriage a matter of life and death and call what's left over romance.